Mr. Curbelo.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this hearing, and I thank the ranking member as well. This issue is of critical importance to my community in South Florida. Most people know South Florida is one of the most beautiful parts of this country, a lot of hardworking entrepreneurial people, but we have another distinction which isn't as attractive or as desirable. And I will just read the first line from Miami Herald article published recently. With federal agents leading Medicare fraud busts nationwide, and in the nation's Medicare fraud capital of Miami last week, a drug-dealing Miami doctor pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, $4.8 million. Now, the people of my community are sick and tired of having this reputation. And people in my community ask me, how come Visa and American Express and MasterCard can prevent fraud, yet we're always reading about the Medicare fraud that is being chased in the newspaper? And I want to know today from both of our witnesses if there's any more authority that Congress can give CMS to remedy this situation. By the way, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record this Miami Herald article and the corresponding DOJ press release. And we're very pleased. We're very pleased that there was this massive Medicare fraud bust all over the country recently. But that is an indication of a far greater problem. And this is what we're catching. We can only imagine what we're not catching. So I want to know, Mr. Morse, is there anything else that this institution can do to empower you to focus more on prevention so that we can hopefully stop reading all these articles about chasing fraud and putting people in jail?
Thank you for that question. Actually, this institution has done a fantastic job of doing that already. The Ways and Means Committee has increased HICFAC funding for Medicare in recent years. You've given us the authority, actually, as you talk about credit card, the ability of credit cards to find fraud. We use actually a similar system from the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010, which allows us to do very advanced data analytics and identify potential patterns of fraud and abuse there. We've found that to be extremely effective. That program alone has saved over $1 billion in the last 2 years in terms of prevented dollars before they go out the door. One of the challenges that you speak to, though, is the complexity of actually detecting and preventing fraud, because a lot of it takes on-the-ground investigations. It takes looking through a medical record from a provider, making sure that that medical record actually meets what the beneficiary actually received in terms of the services or needed in terms of services. And that often is, it's labor-intensive, it's potentially burdensome on the providers, and we do very cautiously balance that burden with our investigative work. But we've actually been very appreciative with everything the committee has done. Even most recently in MACRA, removing the Social Security number from the beneficiary ID card in Medicare is going to help us along identity theft. We have a number of authorities that we found to be extremely helpful, and we continue to do better and continue to make progress going forward. But
so, Mr. Morse, you don't think there's anything we can do on the front end as these potential providers, candidates to become Medicare providers are applying? Because I hear from legitimate healthcare providers all the time, the easiest thing to do is to set up a Medicare fraud scheme because you automatically get approved. Now, you've told me here today that it's a burdensome process to get approved as a Medicare provider. How do I reconcile that with what I'm hearing from healthcare providers back home?
We've got a number of provider screening requirements that are already in place. So we screen for whether or not the provider is potentially a felon or they have any sort of felony conviction. We make sure that they are properly licensed in their jurisdiction. And then we also do, even if they are enrolled, we do continuous monitoring in the background. We have data systems that actually do that electronically without actually any burden on the provider. The provider doesn't know that this is going on, and we are able to kind of look and make sure that that provider is maintaining their compliance with our program standards. But we will then take action if we find that there is any potential abusive billing or any issues that arise from that provider's behavior.
Thank you, Mr. Morse. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you again. Whatever it takes, I think this committee this Congress needs to empower these agencies to remedy this situation. For taxpayers, for Medicare beneficiaries, it's very demoralizing to read on a weekly basis in Miami these articles about people running these schemes that have cost the taxpayers billions and billions of dollars, and by the way, threaten the solvency of Medicare, Social Security, and many other of our entitlement programs. I thank our witnesses. We need to do much better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity.